He thought he controlled everything. On Valentine's Day he was dining alone until he saw his ex with 3 identical children. 3 years of silence. 3 kids he never knew. Now it's all or nothing. Hey, where are you watching us from today? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. The soft hum of conversation filled the air of the upscale restaurant, an orchestra of laughter, whispered confessions and clinking glasses. Logan Hastings sat alone at his table, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, watching as the ice cubes slowly melted into the rich depths of his whiskey. He was not a man prone to nostalgia, nor one who indulged in sentimentality. Emotions were distractions, unpredictable elements that he had long since eradicated from his carefully curated life. His empire was built on precision and unwavering control. Every deal, every acquisition, every move was planned to perfection. But fate, as it turned out, had never been a part of his calculations. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows against the polished mahogany walls, and as Logan lifted the glass to his lips, his gaze landed on a vision from the past. Across the room, seated at a table with an easy grace that had once haunted his dreams, was Sophie Carter. Her laughter, warm and genuine, curled through the air like an intoxicating melody. But it was not just Sophie that held him captive. Seated beside her were 3 small figures, 2 identical boys and a little girl, their eyes bright with mischief, their features eerily familiar. Logan's grip tightened around the glass, his pulse a deafening drum against his ribs. The world narrowed, and for the first time in years Logan Hastings, the man who had mastered the art of control, felt it slip through his fingers. The boys, mirror images of himself at that age, had his same sharp jawline, the same piercing blue eyes that had once stared back at him from old family portraits. The little girl, delicate yet fierce in the way she held herself, had Sophie's fiery determination written all over her. A wave of realization crashed over him, brutal and inescapable. These were not just any children, they were his. And he had never known they existed. The restaurant, once a haven of predictability, now felt suffocating. Logan set his glass down with a quiet thud, his mind spinning with questions. 3 years. 3 years since Sophie had walked out of his life, severing the last frayed thread of what they had been. He had told himself he had moved on. That whatever emotions he had once harbored for her had been buried beneath the weight of ambition. But now, as he watched her tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, as he saw the way her fingers rested protectively on the back of one of the boys, the past clawed its way to the surface. He had to move. He had to act. The questions burned, igniting something dangerous inside him. Rising to his feet, he cut across the restaurant, ignoring the murmured conversations and curious glances from the other diners. His focus was singular, unrelenting. With every step the reality of what had been stolen from him grew heavier. Sophie looked up just as he reached the table, her smile fading into something unreadable. But it was her eyes, wide, startled, filled with unspoken truths that told him everything he needed to know. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The children, oblivious to the storm brewing between the adults, chattered amongst themselves, their small hands playing with the silverware. Logan swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper when he finally spoke. Are they mine? The words hung between them like a live wire, charged with years of absence, of regret, of things left unsaid. Sophie's lips parted, and for a fleeting second, Logan saw something raw flicker in her expression. Guilt. Fear. And then with a quiet breath she nodded. Is Logan, they're yours. The world tilted, the ground vanishing beneath his feet. 3 years, 3 children, 3 lives he had unknowingly abandoned. His heart pounded, his mind racing to catch up with the brutal truth before him. His entire life had been built on power and dominance, on ensuring that nothing ever happened beyond his control. But this shattered everything. And for the first time in his life, Logan Hastings had no idea what to do next. The silence stretched between them, a gaping void filled with words neither of them knew how to say. Logan stood rigid, every muscle in his body coiled tight, his mind a battlefield of anger, confusion, and an aching sense of loss. Sophie met his gaze, her own eyes wary but steady. She had always been like that, unshaken even when faced with the storm that was Logan Hastings. His hands curled into fists at his sides as he forced himself to breathe. 3 years, Sophie. His voice was low, dangerous. 3 years and you never told me. She exhaled slowly, the weight of her decision evident in the slump of her shoulders. I tried, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I called, I left messages. But you never answered, Logan. A sharp pang shot through him. He had ignored those calls. He had assumed she was reaching out in desperation, hoping to salvage something that had already been shattered. But now, as he stared at the faces of his children, he realized the magnitude of his mistake. He glanced at the boys first. The one on the left was staring at him, his expression guarded, suspicious. The other was more relaxed, his head tilted in curiosity. The little girl, however, clung to Sophie's sleeve, her dark eyes flitting between her mother and the stranger who had disrupted their dinner. Logan swallowed hard and turned back to Sophie. "Why didn't you try harder?" Her eyes flashed. "You think I didn't? You were untouchable, Logan. Your assistant blocked me. Your numbers changed, and even if I had gotten through, do you really think you would have listened?" He hated that she was right, hated that he had been so consumed by his ambition that he had shut out everything else. But this wasn't something he could walk away from. "I want to meet them," he said firmly. Sophie's jaw tensed. "This isn't just about what you want. They don't know you, Logan. You can't just, they're mine." His voice was raw, edged with something close to desperation. "I lost 3 years, I won't lose any more." Sophie studied him, something unreadable flickering in her gaze. Then she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Fine," she said at last. "Tomorrow at the park near my house. Noon." And with that she turned back to the children, her expression softening as she ushered them toward the door. Logan watched them go, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar mix of dread and longing. Tomorrow. He had until tomorrow to figure out how to be a father. The next day, Logan stood at the entrance of the park, hands in his pockets, trying to steady the unfamiliar nerves twisting in his stomach. The park was bustling with activity, children running, parents chatting, the air filled with laughter. It was a world he had never belonged to, a world he had never thought he needed. Then he saw them. Sophie was walking toward him, her steps measured, cautious. The children trailed beside her, each one reacting differently to the sight of him. The boy on the left, Nathan, Sophie had told him over the phone, had his arms crossed, his expression guarded. The other, Liam, was grinning, his excitement barely contained. And Emma, the smallest, kept close to Sophie, her tiny hand clutching her mother's fingers like a lifeline. Logan swallowed hard and took a step forward. "Hi," he said, feeling ridiculous for not knowing what else to say. Liam was the first to respond. "Are you the guy from last night?" Sophie sighed. "Liam, we talked about this." "It's okay," Logan murmured. He crouched slightly, trying to meet them at eye level. "Yeah, I'm the guy from last night." Nathan narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The question sliced through him. He was their father, and yet to them he was no one. He hesitated, glancing at Sophie for guidance, but she remained silent. He turned back to the children. "I'm Logan, and I'd really like to get to know you." Liam tilted his head. "Like know us how?" Logan exhaled a small chuckle, though his chest felt painfully tight. "Well, maybe we could start with playing. What do you guys like to do?" Liam beamed. "I like to race. But you can't catch me." And with that he took off, his small legs carrying him across the playground. Logan looked at Nathan, but the boy only shrugged. "He's fast," he said, unimpressed. Emma, meanwhile, stared at Logan with wide eyes, then turned to Sophie. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Sophie gave Logan a pointed look before reaching into her bag for a water bottle. "She's shy," she said quietly, "give her time." Logan nodded, his gaze flickering back to Nathan, who was still watching him with silent skepticism. This was going to be harder than he thought. But as he saw Liam laughing on the monkey bars and Emma quietly sipping her water, something inside him shifted. He had spent his whole life fighting for things he thought mattered. Now he realized he had been fighting for all the wrong things. Over the next few days, Logan made it his mission to spend time with the children. He showed up at the park every afternoon, and though Sophie remained hesitant, she didn't stop him. Liam was the easiest to win over. The boy was fearless, always dragging Logan into some new adventure. Whether it was climbing trees or playing tag, Liam embraced the idea of having Logan around without hesitation. Emma was more reserved, but slowly she began warming up to him. She would sit beside him on the bench, listening as he read stories aloud, though she never spoke much. Nathan, however, was a different story. One evening, as Logan walked them back to Sophie's apartment, Nathan lagged behind, his face set in a stubborn scowl. Logan slowed his pace, waiting for the boy to catch up. "What's on your mind, buddy?" he asked, keeping his tone light. Nathan glared up at him. "Are you gonna leave?" The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Why would you think that?" Logan asked carefully. Nathan shrugged, looking away. "'Cause that's what people do." Logan exhaled, crouching down so they were eye level. "Nathan, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere." The boy's expression didn't change. "That's what my mom thought too." Logan had no response to that. For the first time he truly understood the damage he had done. And for the first time he realized just how much he had to prove. The days stretched into a routine. One Logan had never anticipated, but found himself unwilling to abandon. He showed up at the park every day. Sometimes Sophie stayed, watching from a distance, arms crossed in a stance that was more about self-preservation than hostility. Other times she left him alone with the children, an unspoken test of his resolve. Liam remained his biggest champion. The boy had no reservations about Logan's presence. Always eager to pull him into games or bombard him with questions, Emma, though still shy, had begun offering him small pieces of herself, a flower she found on the grass, a whispered goodnight when he walked them, a hesitant smile that felt like winning the lottery. Nathan was the one who made him work for every inch. One afternoon, as Logan attempted to teach Liam how to properly kick a soccer ball, Nathan stood off to the side, arms folded, his scowl firmly in place. Logan ignored it for as long as he could, but eventually he walked over. "You don't like me very much, do you?" Logan asked, keeping his voice even. Nathan's glare was sharp. "I don't trust you." Logan nodded, expecting that answer. "Fair enough. But I'd like the chance to change that." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Why no?" Logan hesitated. There was no easy answer. "Because I was stupid before. Because I thought the things I was chasing mattered more than what I left behind. And because I can't change the past, but I want to be here now." Nathan didn't respond. He just studied Logan with a depth far beyond his years before finally muttering, "We'll see." It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, Logan found himself sitting on a park bench with Sophie. The children were asleep at home, and for the first time in years they were alone. "You're really trying," she admitted, her voice softer than he expected. He turned to her. "I don't know how to be a father, Sophie, but I want to be," she sighed, rubbing her hands together. "It's not just about showing up, Logan. It's about being consistent, about proving to them that you're here to stay." Logan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I know I screwed up. I know that I don't deserve to just walk in and have everything fall into place, but I'm here." Sophie hesitated before looking up at him. "Why did you ignore me back then?" His stomach tightened. He had known this question was coming because I was afraid, he admitted. "Afraid that if I let you in, if I let anything distract me, I'd lose everything I worked for." Sophie studied him, her expression unreadable. And now Logan met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Now I realize that everything I worked for means nothing if I don't have them." For the first time, Sophie's expression softened, but the walls around her heart were still there. He could see them, feel them. And he knew that breaking them down would take more than just words. The night was cold, the air thick with unspoken words. Logan had just dropped the children off, and as he walked away, he heard the door open again. "Logan," he turned. Sophie stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself. "Come inside." It wasn't an invitation, it was a challenge. He stepped through the threshold, and for the first time in 3 years he was inside her home. It was warm. Lived in, filled with small details that spoke of the life she had built without him. Pictures on the wall, toys scattered across the floor. A home that had no space for him until now. Sophie walked to the kitchen, pouring them both a cup of tea. "The kids are asleep," she said, sliding one cup toward him. Logan took it, watching her carefully. "You don't have to do this," she exhaled. "Maybe I do." For a long moment they just sat there. The weight of their past between them. Then finally Sophie looked up. "Do you really think you can be their father?" Logan didn't hesitate. "I know I can." Sophie held his gaze for a long time before finally nodding. And just like that, the game had changed. Days turned into weeks, and Logan found himself adapting to a life he had never envisioned for himself. Boardrooms and power plays had once defined him, but now his world revolved around 3 small, unpredictable forces of nature. He learned that Liam loved to talk about dinosaurs, outer space, and a million things in between. That Emma hated loud noises but adored bedtime stories, clinging to every word as though they were magic. And that Nathan, ever watchful, was still waiting for Logan to prove himself. Progress came in inches, in tiny victories that felt monumental. The first time Emma let him carry her to the car. The first time Liam reached for his hand without hesitation. The first time Nathan didn't flinch when Logan ruffled his hair. And yet, Sophie remained his greatest challenge. One evening, as Logan prepared to leave after spending time with the children, Sophie lingered by the door. "They're getting used to you," she said, her voice cautious. He nodded. "That's the goal." She hesitated. "But I need to know something, Logan. Are you here for them? Or are you here to fix your own guilt?" The question hit like a punch. He wanted to snap back to tell her that she was being unfair, but the truth was he didn't have an answer that would satisfy her. "I'm here because I should have been from the start," he said finally. Sophie searched his face for a long moment before nodding. "I hope that's true." But something in her tone told him she wasn't convinced yet. Logan had spent his life winning. Winning deals, winning negotiations, winning at the cost of everything else. But winning Nathan's trust was proving to be the hardest battle of all. One rainy afternoon, Logan picked the kids up from school. Liam chattered excitedly about his day. Emma clung to his arm, but Nathan remained silent, staring out the window with a blank expression. As they reached Sophie's apartment, Nathan finally spoke. "You left her." Logan turned, startled. "What? You left my mom?" Nathan repeated, his voice steady but cold. "That's why I don't trust you," Logan exhaled. Nathan, you heard her. The words were a gut punch. Logan had been so focused on his relationship with the children that he had ignored the scars he had left on Sophie. I did, Logan admitted, his voice quieter now. And I regret it every day. Nathan finally looked at him, searching for something. Maybe a lie, maybe an excuse. You better not do it again, he muttered before stepping out of the car. Logan sat there for a long time after the door shut, realizing that his biggest battle wasn't just proving himself to his children. It was proving himself to the woman he had broken. Everything shattered on a Tuesday. Logan had promised to take the kids to the aquarium after school. He had cleared his schedule, sworn to himself that nothing would come between them. But when a last-minute business emergency arose, Logan found himself making a choice he had once considered simple: work. By the time he arrived at Sophie's apartment, the disappointment was palpable. Liam was sulking, Emma clung to Sophie, and Nathan stared at him with a coldness that burned. You said you'd be there, Nathan accused. I know, buddy, Don't call me that, Nathan snapped. You're just like before. Logan felt the weight of his failures settle in his chest. Sophie cut him off. Go home, Logan. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was worse. It was tired. Logan opened his mouth to argue, but Sophie turned away, ushering the children inside. The door closed, and for the first time since this all began, Logan felt the true weight of what he stood to lose. Logan sat in his car outside Sophie's apartment, staring at the closed door. The weight of his failure pressed against his chest like a vice. He had spent weeks trying to prove that he had changed, that he was more than the man who had once prioritized power over love. And in one moment, one missed promise, he had confirmed Sophie's worst fear, that he was still the same. His phone buzzed, a message from his assistant, a reminder of yet another meeting, another responsibility demanding his attention. He ignored it. Instead, he stepped out of the car and walked back to the door. His knock was hesitant, uncertain. It took a long moment before Sophie answered. She didn't look surprised to see him, but she didn't look pleased either. Logan, she sighed. I need to fix this. His voice was quiet but firm. I need to fix what I broke. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. You can't just fix it, Logan. This isn't a contract negotiation. You don't just say the right things and make it all go away. He swallowed hard. Then tell me how to make it right. She studied him, her expression unreadable. You can't keep making promises you won't keep. The kids, Nathan, they need consistency. They need to know you won't disappear the moment things get complicated. Logan nodded slowly. I get that. Do you? Her eyes searched his. Because if you really do, you'll stop trying to fix everything in one grand gesture and start proving yourself, every single day. Her words hit him like a slap. He had always been a man of big moves, dramatic decisions. But this wasn't something he could fix with money or power. This was about showing up. Every day without fail, a small sound interrupted them. A weak, muffled cough from inside. Sophie's expression shifted. Worry flickering across her face. Logan frowned. What was that? Sophie didn't answer. Instead, she pushed the door open and walked inside. Logan followed. Nathan lay on the couch, his small body curled under a blanket, his face pale, his forehead damp with sweat. Liam and Emma sat nearby, unusually quiet. He's been sick since last night, Sophie murmured, brushing Nathan's damp hair back. It's just a fever, but he's been exhausted all day. Logan moved without thinking. He knelt beside the couch, his palm resting gently against Nathan's forehead. The boy stirred but didn't pull away. I'll stay, Logan said, his voice soft. Whatever you need, however long it takes. Sophie hesitated, her guard still up, but then she nodded. And for the first time, Logan felt like he had taken a real step forward. The night stretched long and slow. Nathan's fever remained high, and Sophie barely left his side. Logan stayed too, fetching cold compresses, holding Emma when she got scared, making sure Liam was settled. Hours passed, and sometime near dawn, Nathan stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, and in the dim light of the living room, he looked at Logan. You're still here, he murmured, his voice hoarse. Logan swallowed the lump in his throat. I told you, buddy. I'm not going anywhere. Nathan studied him for a long moment, then with a small nod, closed his eyes again. By morning, the fever had broken. Nathan was still weak, but he was awake, and that alone felt like a victory. Sophie made coffee, exhaustion lining her face. Logan sat across from her at the kitchen table, watching her stir her mug absently. You really stayed, she murmured almost to herself. I meant what I said. Logan replied, I'm here for them and for you. Sophie let out a small breath, rubbing her temples. I don't know how to trust that, Logan. He reached across the table, gently covering her hand with his own. Then let me prove it. Every day for a long time, Sophie didn't say anything. Then finally she looked at him. Stay for breakfast, she said softly. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of a second chance, but it was a beginning. And this time Logan wouldn't waste it. Thank you for listening until the end. What did you think of this story? You can leave your feedback in the comments. It helps me improve and motivates me to keep sharing stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the notification bell. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will also touch your heart. A big kiss and see you in the next story.